Hi, this is Scott Amyx, and I'm joined by Jim Malcolm, CMO at Humaneyes Technologies. Welcome, Jim.
Hi, Scott. How are you today?
All right. So just by looking at even your background, I can see that photography isn't just something that you do for work during the day, but it's something that seems like a passion for you. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. Long story short, I was going to go to law school, and I was dating a beautiful young lady at the time who said, "Why are you going to law school?" I said, "Oh, so I can make a lot of money and travel the world as a photographer." And she kind of hit me upside the head. And anyway, long story short, I ended up going to Rochester Institute of Technology, which led me into this thing called digital photography. And I worked with Sony to introduce the world into digital photography. And although I never did become that photographer that I wanted to be, I've worked with some of the most amazing photographers and videographers around the world. So it's been a lot of fun.
Now, you were at Sony for over a decade, and then you also worked on some acquisition and reintegration of Pentax into Ricoh.
That's
And
right.
at Ricoh, you were the president and CMO for several years before joining Humaneyes. Can you tell us about that progression and why you eventually made it to Humaneyes?
Yeah, so I did what I could do with Sony, and I advanced a lot, not only in the camera world, but also got to touch on products like Walkman and the e-reader technologies and all that type of stuff. And I had the opportunity to move over to Ricoh with the acquisition of Pentax because I love the idea of medium format cameras. And anyway, through that transition, I had introduced Ricoh into 360-degree photography. And I was at a design facility that they have in Tokyo, and they were showing me lenses that they were using on the front bumpers of cars for collision avoidance and lane management. And I said, you know what, if you took two of those and put them back to back, you could make a 360-degree camera in a single exposure. And that's where we kind of started this whole world of spherical imaging 360 photography in a single device.
That's actually really pretty cool. Actually, it reminds me of the MIT's Fifth Sense, where they took essentially a mouse and a few things. But the fact that you took something that's inexpensive, readily available, and turned that into a larger capability, that's quite intriguing. Now, Humaneyes is based in Israel, and it looks like they got a pretty large portfolio of patents and technologies. Why did you decide to work with them?
So I'm just going to pull up a product here for those who are not necessarily familiar with what a 360 camera is, but you have cameras that point in both directions. The thing that Humaneyes had been doing very well is they are experts in stereo and 3D. And at the time I joined them, we were trying to figure out how do you make a 3D camera so when you put it on a VR headset, you can see everything in 3 dimensions. And that's where Humaneyes came in with technology as simple as pushing a button and the lenses open up so that you have both a left and a right eye. And it's that left and a right eye that when you put it into a VR headset, it basically replicates what the human eyes sees. And so my motivation in joining Humaneyes is that because I believe all of us will live with some sort of a near field screen, whether that's virtual reality or augmented reality, will have a near field screen. In order to do that right, you really need stereo, and that's where Humaneyes expertise is in stereo 3D calculations for virtual reality.
Now, there are a lot of 3D VR 360s that are out there in the marketplace. So how is your XR Dual 360 and VR 180 5.7K camera different from what's already out there in the marketplace?
So for the most part, the easiest way to answer that is flexibility, because not everybody always wants to image in 3D VR, right? In other words, not 100% of what you're creating, you're going to actually play back in a VR headset. It gives you the flexibility to close it down and have a very portable 360 camera that you can connect to your mobile phone and create all kinds of content for something as simple as Instagram and YouTube.
Yep, gotcha. Now, one of the things I think from a user experience that you guys seem to be doing quite well is that compatibility with the smartphone. So how does it work in terms of the short range frequency? Is it on Bluetooth? Is it on Wi-Fi? And then the storage constraint of the smartphones.
Yeah, so the connection between your camera and your phone is Wi-Fi. Unfortunately, we can't use Bluetooth. There's just not enough bandwidth for that transfer. In fact, the Vuze XR shoots about 1 GB of data for every 1 minute of recording. So to your point, the mobile phones can sometimes get ground to a halt, or you can fill them up pretty fast with storage. So We put a lot of onboard storage on the camera. It uses a micro SD card, so you can store a lot of data there, transfer what you want over to your mobile phone, and then just use it from there.
Yep.
One other piece of note that's interesting is we've recently released something called Humaneyes Cloud. And this is a cloud technology that allows you to take the raw data from the camera, push it up to a cloud service, and that's where we can host it, allow you to stitch it and work with it. And that way, basically, effectively eliminating the need to push that data to your mobile phone.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure I'm clear there. So you're saying that the 4G LTE capability is built into the device, or that it's still having to piggyback off the smartphone into the cloud?
Yeah, so we're still using the mobile phone as that intermediary, right? So you can either use your mobile phone or, quite frankly, even use your computer to move the data from the memory card to the cloud. Then once it's in the cloud, you use your mobile phone as that interaction. But yes, we do use the LTE to move that up. Now that's going to become very different in the not too distant future as 5G starts to come out. Okay, maybe 1 to 2 years from now. But not only will we be able to move the data faster, but because of edge computing capability of 5G, we'll be able to use that cloud computing much more effectively and efficiently to push your high resolution VR content out.
Now, once all that raw data is in the cloud, aside from the manipulation and editing and the storage aspects of it, are you guys going to be eventually applying machine learning and classifiers to auto detect and learn and be able to auto tag metadata into the frames?
Exactly. It becomes a smart device once you have that much computing power at your, well, right at the edge, so to speak. And then we can add all kinds of different capabilities to the system.
Terrific. Now, your target segment seems to be primarily consumer, but then also professionals as well. Do you guys go into more of the B2B on the professional side, or still consumer, just power users?
Now, the consumer side of things, call them power users or prosumers. That's kind of more of our early segment. For the last 4 years, we've really been going after and catering to those professional users. So, for example, we've had cameras that have gone up to the International Space Station with a collaboration between National Geographic and NASA. We've been with in the Discovery Channel with Mako Sharks. So that professional place is where we usually play with much more expensive cameras. But we started to help make photography more accessible and VR more accessible with the explosion of things like Oculus Go, which is a VR headset for $199. So as the number of headsets increases, the desire for consumers to create their own virtual reality content also continues to grow. So we believe that user-generated content is what's going to help fuel the utilization of those headsets, not just the purchase of them.
And I think what you guys are trying to enable is downward pressure on the costs, and particularly the hardware and software, so that user-generated content, the barrier to user-generated content for 3D becomes more available, so that you can actually increase that availability and grow that marketplace. I want to
That's right.
talk a little bit about kind of your core IP, because there's a lot of things that you do cover. I think you do creation, display, lenticular printing, motion effects. If you had to kind of identify key spots, where are your greatest IP strengths?
Um, there's a lot of areas where we have some strengths, our good strengths, right? We have over 70 patents in there, really around 3D printing, the computer animation and 3D graphics, and then in and around the camera technology. We're only about 4 years into actual camera hardware itself, so we're continuing to build on those portfolios. But if I had to summarize it, I would say anything that's related to 3D display and or 3D creation is really where our strength is.
And for some of those core capabilities that's more specific, why are you guys not, or maybe you guys already are licensing that to larger manufacturers or service providers? Why do you feel that there's a need to provide a end-to-end solution?
So right now, the industry itself is in its infancy. People are still trying to understand, what do I do with these headsets themselves? How much of that is entertainment? How much of it's education? How much of what's in there is what's called real-time rendered? In other words, computer generated entirely. How much of that is actually recorded content? So as the market is maturing, we're continuing to build all of those relationships behind the scenes that help add value to the company, and ultimately that portfolio can be licensed out and used as other companies enter the market.
Now, we've already talked about kind of selfies and more social media context for Instagram, but if you could just briefly talk about some other use cases around training, consumer trials, and even maybe, telehealth as an example.
Yeah, so one that's actually really interesting that I came up with a lot of a discussion when I was doing yesterday is in and around elder care. This one's interesting because in the past, if you had to take your parents or your loved ones, right, and put them into a home, it's very hard for them to be able to participate in other family moments that are going on. And take that to a little bit further and say, okay, what if I'm dealing with somebody who is a dementia patient or is suffering from Alzheimer's? What the camera technology allows you to do is go in and capture that technology or that event in 3D, then go into the home and put them in a virtual reality headset. And between the combination of 3D graphics, the proximity of that screen to their eyes, especially people who have failing eyesight, and 360-degree 3D audio on the back end of it, it's the closest that you can do to get people into that event. So whether it's combating loneliness or working through de-escalation of somebody when they become frustrated or lonely in their home, incredibly powerful tools. So that's a couple kind of very practical ones that have come up, and then there's a laundry list of commercial and enterprise solutions as well.
Yeah, I've seen quite a bit of studies around the use of VR, in particular around mental health and dementia, as well as memory recall, and even stroke patients as well.
That's right.
So, tremendous opportunities there. Tell us a little bit about kind of your product roadmap. I see that there's something that's you guys are promoting from a sale. Talk about that, and also what's coming up in the next few months.
Yeah, so in the immediate short term, what we're really focusing on is working on continuing to make the Vuze XR more accessible to consumers. So starting today, which happens to be Virtual Reality Day for anybody that's chiming in. So it's actually a website called virtualrealityday.org. If you want to find out what events are going on in your area, you can go look at those. But we are running a promotion on this particular camera, bringing it down from $439, which is its regular price point, down to just $299. And the reason we're doing that is, in parallel, companies like Oculus and HTC are also doing very strong pushes for VR headsets this holiday season. And we want people to be able to immediately utilize those headsets to their fullest potential by creating content on the back end. So kind of going in parallel together with those other manufacturers to get cameras out there. That's the short-term push. The longer-term opportunity, of course, is that cloud that I talked about. The Humaneyes Cloud Beta 1.0 is launching now. We are looking for some additional beta testers to get in there. In fact, we're looking at it to be a very mass scale. So you can visit humaneyes.com in order to learn more about that beta program and sign up and become an active participant with us as we move the VR creation from the mobile phone up into the cloud service.
Terrific. The last question I have for you is if you can share in your career, whether it's a product or just a business challenge or failure that you experienced and the lesson learned that you can share with others.
Yeah, I think it's this. When you're creating a new industry, and I don't care what industry it really is, first embrace open industry standards. And I'll bring you back to my example of working with Sony, and I had responsibility for the Walkman brand. Now, when I took responsibility for the Walkman brand from a marketing perspective, it was still a thriving category. Right as I took the reins, a small little company called Apple launched something called the iPod. And at the time, Sony, in fact, Sony still does, own a music studio. So they used something called AdTech 3, which was a digital rights management software to protect the artists. However, at the time, MP3 was very, very popular, open industry platform. We refused, or actually, I wanted it and never got it through. I didn't fight hard enough for it, but so we stuck with AdTech 3. And within a very, very short period of time, I mean, like 6 months, Sony went from being the king of portable music to playing catch up for the, for the years to come. So I guess my lesson learned was embrace open industry standards, follow the market, and then add your level of expertise to kind of make sure that you're maintaining your market share. But don't try to launch a new technology on a proprietary closed loop system.
Yeah, that is a terrific advice. And for you, you're very interesting point of view from the product manufacturer side. You've seen kind of the multi-generations of digital, both music, but also imaging, and now where things are going as well. So very exciting to speak with you. Today I've been joined by Jim Malcolm, who is the CMO at Humaneyes Technologies. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Have a great afternoon.